You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode, we're reviewing match number 10 of the ICC Champions Trophy for 2025 between Australia and Afghanistan. And for the first time since 2009, Australia have made it to the semi-finals of a Champions Trophy. With some help from the weather, even without the intervention of the weather, they would have won this game against Afghanistan. For Afghanistan, this marks the end of their first ever Champions Trophy. They did well to recover with the bat to post 273, but poor fielding and bowling put them on the back foot early, and Australia looked well in control if the rain didn't bring the game to an end. And that's pretty much how this game panned out, really, between Australia and Afghanistan. The rain, the weather was always going to be a threat. And towards the start of the Australian run chase, the rain came, settled, the rain stopped, and then obviously the umpires decided to call the game off because the outfield was so saturated and puddles of water were pooling everywhere. So that was the concern, and that's why this game between Australia and Afghanistan ended in a no result. But for Australia, they're through to the semi-finals for the first time since 2009 in the Champions Trophy, as I mentioned. And for Afghanistan, well, it was a bit of a mixed performance in this game against Australia. A well below par score of 273, compared to the other scores that have been scored here in Lahore in this Champions Trophy, well in excess of 350 when Australia and England played, and obviously 320 odd when Afghanistan won that game against England. It was a below par score. They were under pressure with the ball, didn't bowl well, didn't catch well, and if the rain didn't come, Australia were looking like going to win this game and were going to be victorious. So, no doubt Afghanistan would be disappointed that their tournament had to end this way. So it was quite an interesting game from both sides, Australia and Afghanistan. So no doubt we'll talk about that in this episode today. Look back at the game, talk about Australia, talk about Afghanistan in terms of their performances. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. And first of all, let's have a look back at how this game panned out in the way it did. We'll have a look back at the match summary. Afghanistan batted first. They won the toss. They made 273 all out from their 50 overs. Sadiq Atel top scored with 85. And Ben Dorshus led the way with the ball with Australia, taking 3 wickets. Australia needed 274 runs to win. They finished on 1 for 109 in 12.5 overs when the rain came, and therefore brought an end to the match. Travis Head top scored with 59 not out, and Azmat Olmarza took 1 wicket. He took the only wicket of the Afghanistan bowling performance. The game ended in a no result because of the weather, and that's pretty much how this game panned out, really. Unfortunately, the weather getting the better of us in the end. So that's pretty much what happened in terms of the scores in this game between Australia and Afghanistan from the Gaddafi Stadium in Lahore. Now then, what were some of the key moments and key factors in the game that really decided where this game was heading towards? Well, first of all, the rain was a big moment, of course, brought an end to the game, and therefore the game ended in a no result. That was one big moment that happened in the match, but there were a couple. Sadiq Atel's innings of 85 and Azmat Olmarza's innings of 67 were important for Afghanistan to get to a score of 273, even though it was well below par. Very important because Afghanistan at one stage were 7 for 199, and that was in the 40th over. They didn't look like getting a big score, not even 250. Let alone 200 at one stage, because they lost a few wickets in the middle overs, and Australia were doing very well to put the brakes on. But Sadiq's innings of 85 and Azmat's innings of 67 batted well with the tail towards the back end of the Afghanistan innings, did well to get Afghanistan to a score of 273. The other key moment and key factor in this match was pretty much Afghanistan's poor bowling and fielding, which pretty much put them on the back foot in this game against Australia. They dropped a couple of catches. Rashid Khan dropped Travis Head on 6. Travis Head went on to make 59 not out. Matt Short, even though he was incapacitated, couldn't really move all that well, Matt Short, because of a quad injury. He went on to make 20, but he was dropped by the sub-fielder of Omarz's bowling. So a couple of drop catches for Afghanistan there. Australia got off to a lightning start in the run chase. They broke the back of the chase in the power play, really. And we're on track to chase down the target of 274 if it wasn't for the rain that intervened and brought the game to an end. So Afghanistan's dropped catches, their poor fielding, they didn't start well with the ball. That was a big moment as well. If Afghanistan were likely to at least try and make an impact in this game with the ball in the run chase, I had to take early wickets. But unfortunately, the drop catches of Head, which was a big one, Matt Short, they soon got him out after that, plus the poor bowling, cost them dearly. So those were some of the key moments and factors from this game between Australia and Afghanistan. Now, let's talk about Australia and talk about how they performed with bat and ball in this game against Afghanistan in this Champions Trophy. A pretty good result, I suppose, for Australia, even though the game was ended because of rain, brought the game to an end. But if the rain didn't come, Australia were on track for a very convincing victory with the start that they had. They broke the back of the run chase in the first 10 overs of this run chase. So it was a pretty good performance with bat and ball from Australia. They're through to the semi-finals, which is a great result. No one really sort of predicted Australia to be in the semi-finals, given the bowling attack and the weaknesses there. But they were able to qualify for the semis. And more importantly for Australia, starting to get that belief within this group that is heavily depleted without Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, to give them that belief, especially this bowling attack. So we'll start with the batting side of things. So chasing 274, they got off to a lightning start. That was mainly down to Afghanistan's poor fielding and bowling. Travis Head was dropped on 6 by Rashid Khan. That should have been taken. That was off the bowling of Faruqi. And then Matt Short got dropped on 20. So a couple of drop catches from Afghanistan and some poor bowling, really. They didn't get it right with the ball, Afghanistan. And Australia were off to a lightning start. Matt Short, Travis Head added 44 for the first wicket. Matt Short got out after he was dropped. He got out next ball. He was impacted with that quad injury, so he couldn't really move much and put any weight in his legs. But then Steve Smith came in, good partnership with Head of 65 unbeaten. Australia were 1 for 90 at the end of the first power play. They were going at 8.5 runs and over, which is a pretty good clip. They only needed 5.5 runs and over to chase down 274. But the rain came. They finished on 1 for 109. And the rain set in, and that was the end of the game. So Australia were on track to chase down this score of 274, which was a below par score, really, from Afghanistan. And that's why Australia did very well to keep Afghanistan to 274. Travis Head hitting his straps at the right time. I suppose for Australia, it's important that key players with the bat are scoring some runs. Obviously, Travis Head, more importantly, 59 not out of 40. He was dropped on 6, as I mentioned, by Rashid Khan. Took his chances, and he was able to make the most of it. So I suppose going into the semi-finals, that's a good thing for Australia and Travis Head that he's starting to get some runs. Steve Smith, the same as well. I thought he batted well for his 19 of 22 deliveries. Batted well, played some good shots, hit some boundaries. Very important for Australia that he gets some runs. He missed out on the game against England. And the only negative, I suppose, with Australia's batting, and something that they all need to to probably consider going into the semi-final, either against India or New Zealand, is Matt Short. Now, unfortunately, with Matt Short, he picked up an injury, a quad injury, and we saw that in his batting. He was very limited in his movement. He couldn't put much weight through his front leg. You could see that he was struggling with some sort of injury. So for Australia, that's the only negative with the batting side of things, is that Matt Short is potentially going to miss out the semi-final. So who do they replace him with? Most likely probably Jake Fraser-McGurk being in the squad. He'll probably take Matt Short's position at the top of the order going into that semi-final, either against India or New Zealand. So that was the only negative for Australia, was Matt Short getting injured in terms of the batting side of things. But Travis Head, Smith scoring runs, they looked pretty comfortable. Afghanistan weren't bowling well, and they made Afghanistan pay, really. So if the game wasn't affected by rain, they were on track for a very convincing victory with the way they started. And I suppose for Australia, very important to get some game time in the middle. I don't know what it is with Australia and Champions Trophies and rain. The last few Champions Trophies, Australia have been affected by rain quite a bit over the last couple of Champions Trophies. And in this Champions Trophy in Pakistan, the rain has followed them again. They didn't play in Rawalpindi against South Africa. That game was washed out. This game against Afghanistan washed out towards the end, but they did get a bit of time in the middle. And I think that's very important for Australia. Going into a semi-final, it's very important to get some game time in the middle. So they've had limited game time in this tournament. They played the game against England, which was a full game. The game against South Africa was washed out. The game against Afghanistan, they played half of it before it was ended because of rain. So very important for Australia to get that game time in the middle. So the batting was good, really made the most of the opportunities with the bat there, Australia. Travis Head, Smith, even Matt Short were good. But really, it was helped out by poor bowling from Afghanistan, really. The bowling side of things, yet again, I thought the bowlers did pretty well. Dorshus, Ellis, and Spencer Johnson picking up wickets and building their confidence, which is very important. Adam Zampa leading the way, picking up 2 wickets again. Glenn Maxwell picked up a handy wicket. So Australia did well to restrict Afghanistan to 273 on this surface. They were able to pick up wickets here and there and really keep the brakes on Afghanistan. At the start of the innings, Spencer Johnson, Ben Dorshus got some swing, and the ball was swinging in these humid, overcast conditions with the rain around that we had in this game. The new ball certainly swung for Australia, and Spencer Johnson got a couple of wickets in that period. And he also got a good wicket of Gurbaz, which was the first wicket of the game. A wonderful Yorker that hit the base of off stump. Left arm over the wicket, bowling to the right-hander, swung back, and Gurbaz didn't know what happened. And it was a reminiscent of Mitchell Starc bowling his Yorkers. Spencer Johnson replicated that on that delivery. So he bowled pretty well up front, and he took the early wicket. And as I said, Australia did well to pick up wickets throughout the Afghanistan innings. They put them under some sort of pressure. Azmat and Sadiq were able to break the shackles, but the other Afghanistan batters struggled against the Australian bowling in terms of the pressure being built and applied with the loss of wickets and consolidation that Afghanistan had to do in their innings. So that was pretty good from Australia in terms of their bowling. They're getting confidence. Dorshus, Ellis, and Johnson. The more wickets they pick up, the more confidence that will put them in good stead going forward into the semi-final in this tournament. And they bowled pretty well. Did their job. Dorshus, another 3 wickets for him. Ellis picking up his first wicket of the tournament. He bowled okay. I suppose his figures don't really reflect that. Spencer Johnson bowled okay. He struggled with his line and length sometimes, Spencer Johnson. He bowled a few wides, and that contributed to Australia's extras. That's another thing with Australia as well in their bowling performance, the extras. I think this is, in terms of the stats, I think it's probably the most extras that Australia have bowled in a one-day innings for a very long time. They bowled 37 extras in terms of 37 extra runs to Afghanistan. But really, when it comes to extras, this is the thing, this is my perspective, is that when you look at extras, don't really look at the buys or the leg buys. You can't really control the buys and leg buys as a bowler. The controllables when it comes to extras is that you can control no balls and wides. So if we look in terms of the no balls and wides that Australia bowled in this game, they bowled 17 wides, which is a bit too many, but they didn't bowl a no ball, which is fantastic. That's what you want. So when people make a big deal about extras and all this stuff, it's mainly the wides and the no balls you should be focusing on when it comes to the extras. Whereas with the buys and the leg buys, you can't really control that. You can't really control buys if the keeper misses it, because that just happens. And also with the leg buys, you can't really control the ball hitting the batter on their body and they're going for runs. So you can't really control that when it comes to the extras. So I know people made a big deal about the extras, but really, when you just take away the buys and the leg buys and you have a look at the no balls and wides, really Australia bowled 17 wides, which is a bit too many, but they didn't bowl any no balls. So that's something for Australia to look at going forward, is trying to limit the wides. Spencer Johnson bowled a few wides in his spell of 10 overs, but that's to be expected when it comes to a left armer and, trying to control the swing that was up front in the innings. I suppose you're going to bowl a few wides here and there. But apart from that, Australia did well. The fielding was okay. There were a few misfields in the field, but there was a brilliant attempt of a spectacular catch from Matt Short, who I think it was, I think it was Gulbuddin Nabib or someone else towards the back end of the innings. Matt Short did really well to stick out the one hand, and it was a spectacular catch and attempt, but unfortunately when he hit the ground, the ball juggled out. So I think that's where probably Matt Short probably injured himself in terms of his quad injury, taking that catch or when he was bowling or something like that, or running around in the field. But that was a spectacular effort, 10 out of 10 for that attempt. There were a few misfields, but generally Australia caught well. They didn't drop a catch besides the Matt Short one, which was a difficult chance with that one-handed screamer. But apart from that, the catching was pretty good. They got a run out. Spencer Johnson got a run out. He ran out Nabi, so that was good. So the fielding yet again for Australia was a good effort. Steve Smith captained pretty well again, juggled the bowlers around pretty well. So a very good performance with the ball from Australia, really getting confidence and gaining confidence this bowling attack. Even though they don't have Stark, Cummins and Hazelwood, this bowling attack is doing okay. It's holding up pretty well. And for Ellis, Dawshes and Johnson, the more wickets they take, the confidence that they will gain going forward, especially into the semi-finals now for Australia, having qualified. And that's the important thing. So Australia's overall performance, they were pretty good with the ball, did well to keep Afghanistan below 300. With the batting side of things, good to see Smith and Head score runs. Matt Short, despite the injury that he picked up, he did well for his 20 off 15. And Australia were certainly on track to chase down 274 if the weather did not play its part. So a pretty good performance from Australia. They're through to the semi-finals, and they'll be hoping for another good performance in the semi-final, either against India or New Zealand, which is yet to be determined following the result of the India and New Zealand match. But no doubt, whoever they play in the semi-final, Australia will definitely be ready for the challenge. So another very good team performance from Australia in this game against Afghanistan. Let's talk about Afghanistan and talk about their performance in this match against Australia. Wasn't to be for Afghanistan, unfortunately. The weather got the better of them and therefore has knocked them out of this Champions Trophy. But I suppose in this game against Australia, they tried their best. The batting side of things, 273 was from their position, where Afghanistan was 7 for 199 in the 40th over. I think it was a pretty good effort to get to 273 from where they were at 7 for 199. And that was mainly down to Azmat Olmarza. His innings of 67, he batted well with the tail to try and get Afghanistan to that score. And also the innings of 85 from Sadiq Atel. Those two innings were crucial for Afghanistan in terms of getting them to 273. At one stage, they weren't looking like getting to 250 plus, but it was a below par score, especially here in Lahore, where the other games between Australia and England and Afghanistan and England, we had scores of around about 350 to 320. So it was definitely a below par score, but really the standouts were really Olmarza's innings and Atel's innings. They batted really well, but the rest of the Afghanistan batters really struggled. And that's the thing with Afghanistan's batting, is that they do rely heavily on one or two batters in their batting lineup. But if they lose early wickets and no one scores a big century, like we saw in the game against England where they won, it was Ibrahim Sadran who scored 177, and everyone else can bat around him. But with Afghanistan, that's sort of the thing with their batting. They do rely on one or two batters, especially at the top of the order with Gurbaz and Ibrahim Sadran. Both of them failed in this game. Gurbaz got out first over with a brilliant Yorker from Spencer Johnson, and then Ibrahim Sadran fell soon after that in the 14th over. Therefore, the batting does struggle from Afghanistan. But I suppose Atel and Olmarza's innings were key in terms of getting them to that 273 score. So Afghanistan's batting, bit hit or miss. Without Olmarza and without Atel, they could have been probably low 200s, maybe even under 200, given the position they were in at 7 for 199. And they lost wickets throughout the innings at the wrong time. And there were only two 50-run partnerships, 67 for the second wicket between Sadran and Sadiq, and 68 between Sadiq and Hazmat, the captain. Those were only the two 50-run partnerships that they had in the innings. So it just tells you that their batting in this game didn't really quite fire in terms of posting a big score to challenge Australia. The bowling side of things, let's talk about that. The bowling wasn't great. Defending 273 was going to be a challenge for Afghanistan because of the under par score, a very good batting surface here in Lahore. It was going to be difficult work, but they bowled poorly. I thought Faruqi and Azmat, they bowled the opening spell in the power play. Both of them were really poor in terms of their lines and lengths, didn't get it right, really put Afghanistan on the back foot early, and especially the fielding. They dropped a couple of catches. Rashid Khan, he dropped Travis Head on 6, and Travis Head went on to make 59 not out. The sub fielder, who I think was on the field at the time, Matt Short, was dropped on 20, and the sub fielder at deep square leg dropped the catch. So Afghanistan, the problem that they have is their fielding. They need to work hard on their fielding. And we've seen from Afghanistan, their batting and bowling has come a long way, but their fielding continues to cost them in games. And I think we've seen that throughout this tournament as well, in this Champions Trophy, is that their fielding has cost them as well in terms of trying to win games and take wickets. But really, the bottom line was from Afghanistan is their fielding was poor with those two drop catches, but their bowling was poor. They didn't quite execute their skills. Faruqi and Olmarza, the opening spell really set the tone. Travis Head was able to get off to a flyer. Matt Short couldn't even run, but he was able to get 20. And then Steve Smith hit a few boundaries for his 19. So that was pretty much the bottom line for Afghanistan with their bowling. So they didn't execute, didn't take wickets early in the power play, and the drop catches and the poor fielding is something that they need to work on. So, yeah, Afghanistan's bowling, not really their best performance thus far in this tournament. Their fielding needs some work, and really it was a underwhelming bowling performance up until where the game got rained off and brought the game to an end. So Afghanistan, I suppose, looking back on this game, The weather had a part to play, obviously, but if they look back on their batting performance, they would reflect and say, we could have batted a bit better, someone to go on and get that really big score. I suppose Attell's 85 and Olmartz's 67. One of them could have gone on to get a big score. I think Attell was probably going to be the one to do that. Unfortunately, he got out, and then Olmartz had to do what he did with the tail at the end and left Afghanistan with too much work to do. And with their bowling performance, the execution, not really hitting the line and length early, not really setting the tone in the innings with the ball. The fielding needs work. They can't afford to drop catches like that. The Rashid Khan one off Travis Head was an absolute sitter at mid-on. They should be taken, and especially in tournaments like this, you've got to take your chances and you've got to field well. So when they reflect on this game, Afghanistan, and probably the whole tournament as a whole, they'll probably say, you know what, we need to really work on our fielding and make sure that we're executing our skills with the bat and also with the ball. So they'll be disappointed, Afghanistan, to be knocked out of the Champions Trophy. But I suppose, they've played some good cricket in the tournament over the 3 games. I suppose the game against England where they won was a wonderful performance. But unfortunately for them, they couldn't go through to the semi-finals. And Australia, in the end, were the team to qualify. But I suppose that's the way it goes in cricket sometimes. The weather does have a say in terms of who goes through and who doesn't. And unfortunately for Afghanistan, they were on the side of the team not qualifying for the semi-finals of this Champions Trophy for 2025 in Pakistan. This game between Australia and Afghanistan was shaping up to be one of the most anticipated matches of this Champions Trophy, given what happened between the two teams in the 2023 World Cup in India with Glenn Maxwell's epic 200. Unfortunately, the rain brought a dampener on proceedings. Australia were on track for victory if the rain didn't bring the game to an end. But with the help of the weather, have booked a spot in the semi-finals for the first time in a Champions Trophy since 2009. They will be pleased with how they bowled and batted in this game against Afghanistan, and more importantly, game time in the middle, given the game against South Africa was washed out at Rawalpindi. For Afghanistan, the rain and the weather brought their Champions Trophy to an end, but at times in this tournament they played some good cricket. The win over England was by far their best performance in this Champions Trophy. Even though they haven't made the semi-finals, they have shown that they can match it with the best teams in the world. Thanks everyone for listening to our review of match number 10 of this ICC Champions Trophy for 2025 between Australia and Afghanistan. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on match number 10 of this ICC Champions Trophy for 2025 between Australia and Afghanistan in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.